In the early cold weather around the morning period of November 13, 2022, in a peaceful college town of Moscow, Idaho, has become the center of one of the most closely examined homicide investigations in special American criminal history. Just imagining students walking home late at night without much concern and playing with each other, and neighbors leaving their doors unlocked, then here comes a serious violent crime that was so much uncommon that many residents fight to imagine it happening there at all. The powerful house at 1122 King Road stood on a gentle slope watching a neighborhood filled with student habitation, a place where students moved constantly, where friends gathered and talked about football games. Roommates came, played, and went at different hours. From the mindset of outsiders, it popped up like countless times, and other off-campus homes which were taken by university students, lively on weekends and always peaceful during exam periods. Sometimes, the investigators would later describe its unusual structure, which has multiple entrances and varying floor levels as details that became unexpectedly significant once they began reconstructing the events of that night. Day after, in the beautiful home lived 6 young women whose lives always revolved around the ordinary rhythms of university life. 4 of them were Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, the Never See Another Sunrise. The 2 other roommates who were sleeping elsewhere in the house survived the night physically unharmed, which their accounts later become central pieces of the investigation. In the early Saturday evening, it had already unfolded much like hundreds before it. Friends that attended social gatherings, football celebrations filled the town. The restaurant stayed busy 24 hours, and students documented moments of ordinary happiness through the means of photographs and social media posts. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen by name spent almost part of their evening downtown before returning home in the early morning hours. Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin was seen attending another gathering nearby before also making their way back to King Road. By all outward appearances, nothing suggested that these routine decisions would divide with extraordinary violence only hours later. Investigators have already spent months reconstructing the movements of everyone connected to the case, reviewing various surveillance recordings minute by minute, collecting digital records, examining mobile phone data, and comparing witness statements against electronic evidence. The resulting timeline became remarkably detailed, but on that November morning, almost none of it was yet known. What authorities first encountered was simply a house filled with unanswered questions. Just before noon, when everywhere was so quiet, higher emergency services received a call reporting an unconscious person at the residence. The wording of the dispatch has attracted widespread public attention, largely because it seemed inconsistent with the horrific reality inside the home. Yet investigators have explained that emergency calls often show only the limited understanding of the caller during moments of extreme confusion and distress. Responding officers arrived expecting to see one situation and instead found something altogether different. Within a few minutes, the property has already transformed into an active homicide scene unlike anything the Moscow Police Department had experienced in decades. Officers secured the area while investigators from multiple agencies began arriving. Detectives quickly found out they were dealing with 4 victims. Each victim suffered fatal stab wounds. There were no immediate signs of forced entry that could easily explain how the killer had entered. Equally striking was the apparent absence of any obvious attempt to show what had happened. The violence itself seemed targeted, deliberate, and astonishingly swift. The university community has already received the news of what happened. Disbelief rapidly gave way to fear. Parents started calling their children repeatedly. Students who had considered Moscow one of the safest college towns in America suddenly questioned whether they should remain on campus, but already rumors multiplied faster than confirmed information, helped by social media, online forums, and 24-hour news coverage eager for new developments. Every passing hour without an arrest seemed to deepen the uncertainty. Behind the scenes, investigators have faced an immense challenge. A crime scene full of this complexity demanded total patience rather than speed. Every surface, every footprint, every strand of hair, every electronic device, and every possible biological trace required careful documentation. The smallest overlooked detail could determine whether the investigation eventually succeeded or stalled indefinitely. Crime scene specialists who know what they are doing have photographed thousands of images before moving a single significant object. Measurements were taken repeatedly to create precise three-dimensional reconstructions of the apartment. Bloodstain patterns were examined, not just merely but to determine where violence occurred, but to better understand movement inside the home. Investigators start analyzing the sequence in which rooms may have been entered, possible pathways used by the attacker, and whether any victims had an opportunity to react before the fatal assault unfolded. One of the earliest mysteries involved the agenda itself. Medical examiners find out the killings occurred during the early morning hours, while most of the neighborhood was asleep. Yet dozens of nearby houses contained students, visitors, and surveillance cameras. A different question was coming up. How could someone commit 4 murders inside an occupied residence and seemingly disappear without immediately attracting attention? That question drove detectives beyond the walls of King Road. Teams then canvassed surrounding neighborhoods, asking for security footage from homes, apartment complexes, and local businesses. Doorbell cameras, parking lot systems, and traffic recordings all became potential sources of evidence. Hundreds of hours of video were collected within that day, synchronized and reviewed frame by frame. What initially appeared to be an impossible search gradually revealed subtle patterns that would later become increasingly significant. Investigators started constructing a digital schedule for everyone known to have been at or near the residence. Modern homicide investigations hardly depend upon a single piece of evidence. Instead, they resemble enormous puzzles assembled from countless independent fragments. Cell phone connections, location data, financial transactions, social media activity, surveillance imagery, eyewitness observations, and forensic laboratory results each provide only partial perspectives. When those perspectives line up, investigators start to gain confidence that they are approaching an accurate reconstruction of events. Among the surviving roommates, one account would surely later become particularly important. In the night, one roommate reported that he kept hearing unusual sounds that initially seemed consistent with ordinary activity in a busy student house. At that point, she believed she heard someone say that another person was there. Later, after she opened her bedroom door more than once, she reported that she saw an unknown male figure dressed in dark clothing walking past her toward the rear sliding glass door before leaving the residence. Frozen with fear, she then remained inside her room. That observation alone did not identify a suspect. Under stressful conditions, you will believe that witness memories can be incomplete, and investigators are careful not to rely exclusively on human recollection. But yet portions of the description would eventually become one element among many, neither standing alone nor existing in isolation. Meanwhile, some forensic scientists focused intensely on biological evidence recovered, which was from the scene. Unlike television dramas, DNA analysis is frequently instantaneous. Samples were documented, preserved, processed, and interpreted according to strict scientific procedures, were designed to withstand scrutiny in court. Contamination risks are taken seriously because even the smallest procedural error can undermine confidence in otherwise reliable findings. One item recovered by investigators would become particularly important. A knife sheath was discovered near one of the victims. Although the murder weapon itself was not found at the scene, the sheath represented something potentially even more valuable. If handled by the perpetrator shortly before or during the attack, it might preserve microscopic biological material invisible to the naked eye. Laboratory specialists then carefully examined the object, searching for any recoverable genetic profile. What they eventually identified would become one of the earliest forensic threads connecting the crime scene to an individual unknown to investigators at that moment. But DNA alone rarely solves a homicide. But it must be placed within a broader context, supported by independent evidence capable of explaining how and why that genetic material came to be present. While laboratory work progressed, another investigative team noticed something unusual hidden among hundreds of surveillance recordings collected from throughout the area.